Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Grow2Market podcast. I'm Tim Meredith, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Chris Cox. I worked with Chris quite a few years ago now, actually. We both worked at KCOM. I'll just pass you over to Chris quickly, just for a quick introduction. He can tell you what he's been up to recently.
Thanks, Tim. So I am a product and technology leader. I guess I sit in this weird space where I'm one of those people that's gone from being an engineer, software engineer, into a product and management-y space. So half my career has actually been practical engineering, and half of it has been leadership and mentoring and coaching and product leadership. And most recently, I've been working with BT, building the replacement media and broadcast network for the UK. So if you've been watching TV in the UK, you've probably been using our network, which is pretty nice.
This is exciting stuff. Yeah, no, really good. And certainly it sounds like you've been busy over the last few years. And of course, you have your own consulting business as well, I guess. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. And I should probably also just mention, just as a small caveat for today's session, we're probably going to talk about quite a few subjects, quite a few issues in organizations. And we've also both worked for quite a few different organizations. So I'm just going to say right now, let's to not assume that any issues we talk about exist in any particular organizations we've worked in. They may have done, but we certainly don't want to allude to any particular issues with any of them in today's conversation. Not that we're going to be particularly sort of talking down about anyone, but it's just important to note that. And I think today what we really want to cover is about Agile and what it means to be product led today. And I think Agile is a term that's been thrown around quite a lot. We've even got a blog post on our own website on fractionalteams.com. I think it goes a lot bigger than the blog post. And certainly Chris has got some direct experience of working in organizations that have done Agile. We're just beginning to learn a little bit more about that. So I guess just to give us a quick intro, what is Agile?
Oh, the $1 million question. So it's also one of my biggest bugbears. So I was first introduced to the idea of agility via Scrum, which a lot of people are 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And I've made a lot of mistakes in that time, which I think have led me to understand it better than most, but that remains to be seen, I guess. But the biggest mistake that organizations and people and teams and everybody make is they think that Agile is a thing that you do, right? They think it's like waterfall. So we're going to go and we're going to do Agile, and all of these things that we'll do will be part of the Agile methodology. And you hear that a lot, right? The Agile methodology. And it's not that. It's not that at all, right? You go to the Agile manifesto, and it is simply 4 values and 12 principles. That's all there is to it, right? It gets massively overcomplicated, but all it is, 4 values, 12 principles. And those are about creating culture and mindset, right? The idea is if you think in a certain way, then the actions you take will be based on the way you think. And so it's trying to lead you to take the correct actions that will be best for your business because you've got this positive agile mindset. But yeah, that's not the way it tends to get used or sold.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I think that I can definitely recognize what you're saying about organizations that often are thinking they're doing Agile or say Agile a lot, but they haven't got those principles at heart. And I just wonder, are there any particular red flags that you would see out there for organizations that are, maybe saying Agile rather than actually living it?
The biggest one is if the leadership does not actually actively involve itself in the generation of the mindset and the culture. So if you've got senior leadership in an organization who are just saying, hey, I want to put that we're an agile organization onto the shareholder report, and I want to pay some consultants to come in and make us do agile, right? And you've got problems, because you don't
Mm.
build a culture in an organization without active involvement from the leadership.
Yeah.
That's by far and away the biggest red flag that I see, is just lack of involvement from leadership. But there are many, and many of them are even down to using certain frameworks. There's the large scaling frameworks you may have heard of, the SAFEs, the DADs, the LESSes. If you're using one of those, the chances are you're probably not an agile organization. Nothing against those frameworks. They're good at what they do, but they're not good at making organizations agile, which I think is an important distinction. So if they exist, that's generally a bit of a red flag as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's one of those things where agile has now been around for, I mean, as a term, it's been around for probably over 2 decades now, I guess. Agile Manifesto was early 2000s, I think,
Yeah.
and but possibly sometime around then. And I suppose it's been around, and I think that's long enough for the term to start to be misused. I think this is often what happens. People start believing it's something that it isn't. That attitude, that mindset becomes, well, a mindset. It becomes set in, and it's very difficult then for organizations to re-educate and change. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why the Agile principles and all their manifestations sort of have to change over the years. That people have had to say, well, look, you know, this is how we do it now. You've got to think about it slightly differently. Are we having to re-educate people because they haven't really got it to begin with, or is it just that we've improved on agile?
I don't think that the original manifesto is particularly flawed in any way. I think it's there is the Agile 2.0 and things that people have tried to do rewrites, and most of the ones that I see are trying to fill in that gap of what you should be doing, not what you should be thinking. And it
Mm,
almost seems like there's a vacuum there that people feel like they have to fill with some level of practical implementation. But when you dial it back to what the original manifesto was trying to achieve, which was just think this way and you'll probably be all right, I think it's fine. It does a good job of that. Um, I think what's muddied it is it became big, and therefore it became commercialized. And when it
mm.
became commercialized, it was the capital A agile, right? Selling agile as a thing,
Yes.
not as something you are. So it's even using the word wrong, right? I don't do 10 backflips because I do agile, right? I do that because I am agile,
Yeah.
or because I do gymnastics, right? It's even linguistically, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think, yeah, that you end up with a lot of commercialization around it, and
Yeah.
that's
Once.
caused that's caused an ecosystem of people trying to pay for it and not really actually understanding they could be doing it for free much more effectively.
Yeah, I can understand, and I suppose that's where you've got these big consultancies coming in, I guess, as well, and they'll happily put a high price tag on a project to agilify. If that's word of maybe it's being used probably by them. I don't know. But, to come in and say we'll make your company agile. It's 500,000. You know, and I suppose that's one of those things where yeah, like you said, it becomes commercialized. But as a term, I guess, is it fair to say that agile and the agile principles that you've talked about, that they are true to the word agile, and its actual meaning in English? Do you feel like that's true? It is about, doing things faster, more rapidly in a more kind of iterative way.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about doing things faster. It's about doing the right things faster.
Mm,
So generating value for your business and for your customers. So it's all about how can you remove as many blockers as you can to what's actually getting your value out the door for your customers. So concentrate on your customers, concentrate on your people, you know, try and eliminate as much process as you can. Try and eliminate as much bureaucracy as you can. Um, and then experiment with things. Try and, like you said, the rapid iteration. Again, iterating is not about getting things out the door faster necessarily. It's about getting the right thing out the door faster, because you can try an iteration, succeed or fail, adjust course, try an iteration, succeed or fail. So you get to your, I don't know what's the end point, but you get to your value much quicker than you would if you're trying to define it 12 months in advance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that organizations today have changed enough in terms of their business planning, their budgeting, and things like that to support that kind of approach? I mean, I'm still seeing a lot of organizations that are set in this way of annual budgeting, and it's very difficult to change something mid-year. I mean, as a business, we provide a range of services from marketing to product services, and it is with some organizations it's very easy because they have allocated a budget to spend on things without pre-allocating for the entire year ahead exactly what is going to be spent on. But for some organizations, they're extremely rigid, and they say, talk to us in January, talk to us in April. It's the way it kind of goes. What's your opinion about that today? Or are you seeing that organizations have adapted to this way?
I think it's exactly as you said. Some have, some haven't. Certainly, the smaller organizations are far more flexible these days. I think that's just what the market is. If you want to be a disruptor in today's market, you've got to have flexibility and rapidity on your side. For the bigger legacy organizations, then you're absolutely spot on in terms of the fact that it's a lot of legacy thinking.
Yeah.
And there's ways to bridge that gap, but the finance side of an organization, at least from my experience, tends to be one of the most rigid and last to change. So you kind of need to work within the system that you're given. So an example is, okay, you want to fund something for 12 months, but rather than trying to fund a certain outcome, then just fund a team. So you
Yeah.
funded a team for 12 months, but you're trusting that the outcomes and the values you get from that team will be the ones you want. But there's a big element of trust there that you built a products team that will actually be able to get the value for the customer and the value for the business out the door, given the investment you're putting in. But that can work within your 12-month funding cycle for an organization, but you still need a level of trust from the leadership.
For a lot of organizations that do budgeting today, that some have got it right, some haven't, and some organizations are still working in the old way, that they are budgeting for outcomes rather than for teams. And I was just wondering how you've found that working yourself in your own experience, perhaps with some of the projects that you've been involved in.
Yeah. So the finance teams do tend to be one of the last things that'll change in an organization. And I kind of understandably so. It's very difficult, I think, to change, especially in a large organization, to just sort of rework your entire finance function, especially without causing shareholders a decent amount of consternation. But I think there are ways you can manage it as a bit of a halfway house. So an example is, you're setting 12-month budgets, but rather than saying, I'm funding this for 12 months because I want this set of requirements met and this precise outcome, what I'm actually going to do is just fund a team for 12 months. Then you are trusting that team is going to deliver value. May not be the value you're expecting, but you are trusting them to deliver value and to deliver the right value for your company and for your customers. And I think that can work, but there's a trust dynamic that has to be built there in terms of that this team can actually deliver what we want for as an organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess maybe it comes back to your earlier point as well about having more people involved and buying into the principles, that you need the senior leadership, because I guess in an ideal world, organizations would be a little bit flatter in terms of hierarchy. There'd be a lot more decision making within teams and not so much very siloed thinking. But I guess we live in a world where there's all sorts of businesses. I guess going back to what you're saying, having the leadership brought in to the process would make a lot of sense. Can you think of any points along the process where maybe finance and commercial teams might play a part in agile? And I know I'm using probably the word agile in the wrong way here, but in some of the sessions, the various different meetings and things like that that might happen along the way, that might just give them more exposure so that they could feel part of that.
So yeah, I think you're definitely right in terms of the disconnect, I guess, part of that way. If your leaders aren't actively involved and they don't actively understand, then you're going to create that divide, right? You've got this thing working down here that I don't know what they're thinking or how it works, and now that scares me. Therefore, I'm not going to fund it, right? So you have that problem, and you break down that barrier. If the leadership actually understand that, and everyone's working in the same culture, then you know those barriers disappear. So that's hugely important. And so, in terms of actions that you can take to try and do that, well, breaking down those barriers, getting people involved, and social proof is one of the most valuable things you can deliver within an organization. Is, hey, we did something in a certain way, or we were thinking a certain way, and it led us down this path. And hey, turns out it worked. Then everyone can gain trust from it, whether they're directly connected or not. So, as the manifesto says, it's about collaboration, and that's not
Mm,
just between engineers or between testers or whatever it is. That's between everyone in the organization. If you collaborate, you're building a collaborative unit, and you're building a team, and you're building trust, and you're building all of that stuff that eliminates those barriers and enables those walls to come down.
that's a great point. I think you're very right about that, and I've seen a lot of organizations that there is a lack of trust for new ways of doing things. They need that proof, and I think they've got experience of doing things in a particular way that they're very used to that. They know it works for them, and it works to a point. So they say, why change it? Why have I got to work in this new way? So maybe it's difficult for some people to come into organizations and demonstrate that social proof. Um, would it help if maybe people were able to point to external examples? So you're in organization A, you could maybe point at organization B and say, hey, look, they did it this way, and look how quickly they were able to get something to market. They were able to sell it. They were able to iterate on it. Is that something that might be useful to point to external examples?
I think it depends. So there's a distinct problem where when people are quite entrenched, and this is more psychology than anything else. When people are entrenched, if you point out, hey, these people over there did this and it worked really well, they'll just go, oh yeah, but that's just because they're not us, right? It works for them, but it would never work for us, right? So it's almost dismissed because you're just internalizing the way you do things can't possibly be wrong. So which is why the mindset and the culture is so important, right? If that mindset of openness is not there, you're just going to be entrenched in whatever your way of doing things is. And you've got the, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's an element of truth to that. But that also means you're never going to get better, right? In the old Henry Ford quote that everyone knows that he never actually said, which annoys me, which is, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right?
Yeah.
Horses did a great job. Like, if
Yeah.
it ain't broke, don't fix it. Horses were good. But if you hadn't come up with the car, then we would never have the car. So it's easier to change things when things are broken, because you can
Yeah.
demonstrably measure it and go, hey, this is broken. We have to do something. Otherwise, this is going to fail.
Yeah.
You then have an impetus. Trying to change something that it's working all right, but it could be better. That's where the fear comes, because then it could also be worse.
Yeah.
And yeah, pointing at others having done similar things it may. You get some leaders who will look at it and be like, "Oh, this is really exciting. We have to do things the way they do."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that bad. The Spotify model is a great example of that, right? Everyone looks at Spotify and goes, "Oh, we've got to do the Spotify model,"
Yeah.
regardless of the fact that Spotify don't even do the Spotify models.
Yeah. No, and people saying they want, yeah, they want to be like Uber. You know, the Uber of X, the Uber of something was the phrase I think
Yes,
used by a lot of.
exactly.
It's funny actually when you said about the Henry Ford quote, because I've been using that quote for a long time as well, and then I found out that you know, like yourself, that's
It's so
the
good though. It's such a good quote, regardless of whether he said it or not. It's a really great example.
yeah,
So I still use it,
exactly.
but I just wish he'd
Yeah,
actually said it.
yeah, exactly. No, it's a good example. So, I mean, just thinking about then that leadership point that you say. So, how do you get someone who is, let's say, resistant, a leader who is maybe resistant, but let's say open to learning. So let's say they say, okay, you know, benefit of the doubt. Let's see what's involved. Where would you recommend them to start with agile and the product led approach? Where would you say they should really start off
So,
in terms of learning and you know
yeah.
perhaps like that?
If I'm if I'm brutally honest, the idea of the Agile Manifesto and Agile as a thing almost makes it worse.
Mm,
I almost want Agile to go away and the
yeah,
concept just be replaced by the idea of culture led
yeah,
business, right? Just as a leader, come up with a culture of how you want your organization to work and actively get involved in creating that culture. I think
yeah,
is more important than ever trying to adopt someone else's thing.
yeah.
Um, and the culture doesn't necessarily even have to be a good one from your and I perspective. It just has to be
Mm,
consistent. So, you look at the likes of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, who were very visionary, are very visionary, have created excellent organizations, and are pretty well recorded as being terrible people to work for, and having created cultures in their organization of extreme high pressure, extreme high work, it's huge quality. But there are people who will engage with it. So as long as you build that culture and you find other like-minded people, you'll get some level of success from it. In their examples, really great success from it. So it doesn't have to be a good culture, even.
yeah,
Just have some level of consistency and build around people.
yeah. No, it makes sense. And I think that management can do that. They should do that. They
Yeah,
should try to
have to be.
encourage the culture. Yeah, and I suppose that's it. Learn by doing, or at least learn by experience, and to try and. It's interesting you said about earlier. You know, find a problem that needs to be fixed, or maybe there's a problem that exists that, you know, something is broken. You know, we need to fix it. Here's an example, and I wonder if maybe for some organizations, if they were able to start with a problem, but maybe a small one that could be fixed quickly, something that could be. Because the problem with the small problem is that it's probably inherently quite easy to fix, and people might say, well, that was an easy one to fix. But perhaps starting with something small to be able to demonstrate how quickly you can organize a team, and get a response, get an outcome, might be the way forward, perhaps.
Yeah, certainly. Like I say, social proof plays a big factor. Um,
Yeah,
the proof aspect of that is what's really important as well. You need to have data. And
yeah,
everyone goes on about data. And the reason for that is because it's really important. Having empirical evidence that shows something working or not working is the best way to cut through people's concerns. And you
mm,
want to get to a point where you can adequately show the problem, not just, oh, we think this is a problem. You've got data that records, like, we've planned this 12-month plan, and we didn't hit that milestone or that milestone or that milestone. So we replanned it. And then we didn't hit this milestone, this milestone, this milestone. So we replanned it, didn't hit. Okay. We've done this 3 times now. And every single time this has failed. Why are you expecting time number 4 to be any different?
Yeah.
Can we now do something else? Right.
Yeah.
That's an example that I've used in life, right? You have to take that empiricism and go, can we please change the approach? Because we are just knocking our head against a brick wall and that's not helping anyone. So we've got to have a grown-up conversation about this, about what is the right thing to do in the environment we're in. And understanding the environment you're in is a big part of that as well, understanding the context. Because sometimes a 12-month plan is perfectly fine. Sometimes it is perfectly fine. Sometimes you need a 12-month plan, but only if it's in the context where a 12-month plan makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Right.
And I agree. And I think that the going into a team and sorry, motivating a team to work in that way, absolutely you need the proof and you need to be able to show evidence and things like that. But I think in some organization there will be people, and they aren't necessarily leadership or even finance team. There are just going to be some people who are just resistant because it's the old turkeys voting for Christmas. They see themselves as being the ones, who are potentially, going to be affected by this. That they might be nervous about their skills, their experience, their knowledge. That might be the underlying reason why they're being resistant, but it comes out as perhaps being against the new way of working, a different way of working, maybe. And I've been in organizations where we've actively had to talk to those people and say, look, are you happy here? Is there something else going on here? Are you unhappy with the role? Do you need some training? Do you need some support? Is there a reason why you're a blocker? You're consistently a blocker in this process, and I guess that's the point where trying to facilitate ends, and you have to actually deal with the problem.
Yep.
I'm sure I won't talk about any particular specific examples here, but it happens out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's a quote. I can't remember who said it. It was basically like, in any change, there's going to be casualties, which is a pretty brutal way of saying it. But at the end of the day, if somebody is actively not engaging in your company's culture, if they are anti your company's culture, then they need to go and find somewhere that's more suitable for them, because nobody's going to be happy in that environment. They're not going to be happy because everyone around them is of a different mind, and the organization is not going to be happy because they perceive this individual to be blocker or worst case toxic. So if there is no way of bringing people around, then your culture is really important. I'll bang on about it all the time we're talking. And things that are anti your culture, just they need to be brought around, or they need to go away. As brutal as it sounds, because there is probably nothing more important in an organization, for my money, than the culture you build, because everything else comes off the back of it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think the thing is with those toxic people, and I don't want to dwell on the negative, but it is important to address, because I think a lot of leadership are nervous about getting rid of someone who is like essential. They're deemed as being, this company would fall apart if we lost this person, and I've talked to people in HR about this before, and I've said, how do you deal with this problem in companies? Like, how do you deal with the problem of this, unsackable person who's just preventing your company from moving forward? And in the end, they said to me, well, look, it's bad behavior. It's toxic behavior. It's bad behavior. You wouldn't allow them to come in and start throwing food around in the canteen, or, start swearing at people. That's bad behavior in a very overt sense. And in a work sense, if someone is getting in, slowing down your process, getting in the way of your process, maybe is a better way to put it. Why would you tolerate that? It's bad behavior. It's misconduct in the organization, and it should be treated like that, regardless of whether they're seen to be the kind of the elite star player.
Yeah.
But
and also, no one's unsackable. right? It's probably the number one reason why toxic people get away with toxic behavior is because they're perceived to be unsackable. The reality is, as soon as they're gone, it's surprising how quickly other people step up and fill that gap.
Yeah.
Like anyone who thinks that they are untouchable is very much mistaken,
Yeah.
in my view.
Yeah.
You'd have to have built your company pretty poorly to be that reliant on an individual that if you got rid of them, your entire company falls apart, right? And in which case, maybe you deserve it. You probably couldn't have a good idea in the first place.
That's true. No, it's a good point. Yeah, yeah. If you've created it like that, no, it's a good point. So we talked a lot about agile, and I guess agile is is a way of thinking. It's a culture, as you said, and just to touch quickly on something I mentioned earlier, which is about product led thinking, um, which is a different term, I guess, and I've rather incorrectly bundled it in together while talking about agile earlier. But maybe if you could give us a quick definition, maybe of what we mean by product led thinking.
Yeah, sure. So I think, yeah, definitely important to make those two things distinct. Agility is all about your culture and the way you're thinking. Product led is much more about how you're going to organize yourself, as an organization. And it's very much as it sounds. It's just having an organization that is focused on building products that will satisfy customers and deliver value, rather than, and by products we mean something it becomes in life and it goes on forever until it no longer has life, right? Rather than a project which is, we have a specific outcome we want to achieve and we're going to run for 12 months until that's achieved and then it's done.
Yeah.
Not that either's right or wrong. It's just, if you're building a product, be a product led organization. If you're doing projects, be project led. But there's a
Mm.
lot of organizations that try to build products using a project led approach. And I think that's
Mm.
where the problem comes in. Like, if you're going to build a product, commit to building a product, build a product team, support that product for the life cycle of it, develop it as a product, make sure you understand the market and who you're going to sell it to. Don't just try and deliver, a single thing. We got to that point and now it's all done and go home, because you might win a contract or get value out of a single contract, but you're not going to get proper value.
Yeah,
Reoccurring
it's really interesting. Yeah, it's a great point. Really interesting definition there as well, and difference between product and project. And I think probably like yourself, I've seen a lot of products out there that appear to have been led based on multiple projects, and you end up with this kind of Frankenstein monster kind of product, let's call it, which has got a huge amount of technical debt, and it starts to become very difficult to manage going forward. So I guess for anyone listening, we should probably say that a product is usually something that you want to be able to sell multiple times. You've identified a market, you've identified a need, a customer problem, or a customer need that needs to be satisfied, and you want to satisfy it multiple times, not just deliver in a different way every time a number of different
Yeah,
projects.
you want it to be an engine, right? And revenue generation engine, not
Yeah.
just a one and done, cash in on one activity once. Absolutely.
Yeah, and do you think it's important to have other departments involved then in that case in some of the planning? So I'm thinking here, obviously the development teams, the product development teams are involved. There's product management, but what about some other stakeholders in the organization? So I'm thinking about the people who you want to get bought in to help you sell this product. So the sales and the marketing team ultimately. Whereabouts do they fit into the whole process here? Do you feel?
So in an ideal world, they're all part of the product team. And this is, I've got a slight tangent, maybe a slight tangent. I think this is one of the
All
things
right.
that organizations, especially organizations that aren't currently product led, that are trying to change, do very poorly, is actually truly understand what their products are. and for me, that's a really important step, is actually to take the step back and look at your organization and go, what are our products? Especially if we've got legacy ones. How are we trying to define them? What are the value streams? Because the knee jerk is to say, right, this big thing is our product. But actually, that might be a number of value streams in that product that you should really be breaking down and building teams around. AWS do this very well with they used to call it the two pizza team model. So they wouldn't have anything that couldn't be owned by a team bigger than could be fed by two large pizzas. So it kept everything small.
Yeah.
I think they've gone a bit beyond that and now call it single-threaded leadership, I think. So you have a single-threaded leader that will own, one piece. But then they break things down really small. So, you can make the argument that AWS is the product, right? But actually it's not. Each service within AWS is a product. And even when you're making a new service, understanding what path should that be one service, or is this actually two? If we look at the kind of contact center suite of products, Amazon Connect, which is their contact center product, and you've got Comprehend, which is the text analysis one, and then whichever the one is about transcribing transcribe, Amazon Transcribe, there it is. You could argue that all of those could have been bundled just into the contact center suite, right? We're going to have people talk on the phone, we're going to have call recordings, and they're going to transcribe them, and then they're going to get AI text reports about what went on, the sentiment analysis and that kind of thing. You could argue that all of that is part of your contact center product, but actually what they said was, well, no, that we can take Comprehend and make that separate, we can take Transcribe and make that separate, we can take Connect and make that separate, but they will all work together. So having that logical idea of how you're going to break your organization down, then you can focus on how you build the teams within them and what parts of the organization and what members involve in that team. And that should be an end-to-end ownership. Like I say, the Amazon single-threaded leadership model, I think, is very good. You want everything under that product to be able to own and deliver and get it to market end-to-end. And that is sales, marketing, engineering, finance, all of it.
It's like a delivery team. It's like a business delivery team, and that's got to be for delivering more than just the technology. I guess it's delivering the product to market, so it's making sure
that's what it works. I think for me that's what it truly means to be product led. Is you need to be able to deliver from start to finish to market.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. No, and I guess that's the thing that a lot of businesses today are probably struggling with as well, is this ability to compartmentalize, I suppose, or create those separate threads within their product, that they almost like create a solution, and then it becomes very difficult for them to decouple different parts of that solution, and you end up with businesses that can really only sell one thing. And I think that's probably what's happened to a lot of the telco vendors, or the PBX vendors that are out there. Some of the more legacy vendors, they've tried to develop solutions and tried to sell them in a product type environment, in a product oriented world. Whereas people are wanting to consume particular products, and they might pick a product from company A to do a particular part of a solution. They might pick a product from company B to do a different part of the solution. And I think those days of the monolithic kind of service providers, and I'm talking really about the telco world here, and I'm sure it applies to others, that's coming to an end. And I think we can see that by the number of Chapter 11 announcements and things like that are happening in the in the world of telecoms. I guess the counterpoint to that, though, as well, is that it almost requires there to be a level of maturity in the organizations that consume those products to be able to understand that hierarchy, to be able to understand that that way of putting together these solutions. Because I suppose Amazon aren't necessarily going to put the full end-to-end business solution together for you. Well, I guess they have a professional services organization that can do that, but in terms of them selling you products, they they would expect most of their customers to be able to put these different pieces together. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, they tend to do it via partners. So either the customers do it themselves, or you have partners that will deliver for you. Even their professional services, it's been a while. Even their professional services, I don't think they take on like whole projects themselves. I think they tend to be augmenters for their partners or for smaller things. They don't really go out and bid for stuff.
Yeah.
That was a thing that AWS kind of specifically did from the get go. What do they call it? Democratization of the cloud. They wanted it so that they weren't signing a different contract for every different customer. They wanted it so that if you wanted to use our product, you signed up to our product and you used it.
Yeah.
And if you didn't want to do that, never mind, we'll see you later. Which I think
Yeah.
is again, it's a really important shift. They took all that money they would have spent on lawyers and contracts and and they spent it on education, on
Yeah.
educating customers for why you want to use our product.
Mm.
So we might not be able to change your mind now, but when 2 or 3 of your peers have changed their minds, then maybe you'll come knocking on our door again. And yeah, that's what everyone did. So it's a real interesting step, and I think a lot of this comes from, again, it goes back to that culture and that leadership from Jeff Bezos. He really was an excellent leader, and a lot of the ideas came from just him. He was the only person that thought Prime was a good idea, and the only person that thought Prime Video was a good idea, and this kind of stuff. So, I think he had visions that he was like, no, we're just going to go with this, and he had the balls to go with it. And you ended up with a proper product-led organization, and organizations that, like you say, the kind of legacy thinking of, well, we're going to build something just for this customer, and then we'll sign a contract with them, and then we'll try and modify it for this customer, and we'll sign a contract. And all the administration you've now got to deal with, because you're effectively trying to bespoke for every single customer, is, you're never going to scale that.
And you can see that happening for sure. But you can also see some organizations almost like wanting Amazon to be that, to be that type of solution. It's interesting that you see a lot of people complaining about Amazon. A lot of people are think it's fantastic, and it is great. It is a wonderful kind of suite of products, but there are a lot of people complain because they get to the AWS portal, they log in, and they go, "What the hell do I do? What is?" And there's all the documentation and everything there. It's all available, but they're like, "Hang on, so I have to build this thing. I have to provide you with. I need to understand how this thing needs to be architected. I need to understand how what the services are. I need to learn about the services. Where's the button to buy one? You know." And for those people who are negative about it, I think it's just worth saying to them, you're buying from the wrong place. You should be buying from a systems integrator, or you should be buying a product from an organization that actually does provide the complete solution, rather than all of the individual product components.
Exactly that. And that annoys me as well, to be fair. When I've used AWS, I go in, I'm like, I just want this thing to work with that thing. And it just doesn't seamlessly. And you're like, that kind of should. So that annoys me as well, to be quite honest. But
it's interesting as well, because you have this similar thing in Microsoft with Azure, but then you have the idea that they're currently building this what feels not like it's going to become a monolithic application in Teams, Microsoft Teams, and you can see this thing growing, and you can see it becoming harder to develop and harder to iterate as it swells beyond being a simple collaboration tool to now being a calling tool and a reporting tool, and all these different things all combined into one application. You can see all the dependencies starting to be created, and all of the customization stopping working that people have got used to. We're getting annoyed, complaining about it. Why is the API changing? All of these different things.
And it just doesn't work as well for any of those pieces as the competition does. Like, having used both Slack and Teams, Slack is just so much easier to use.
Yes.
It's a joy to collaborate with people on Slack. On Teams, it's pulling teeth.
This is true, and I think it's as well because they're not trying to be too many things at once, right? They're with Slack. Slack is a collaboration tool primarily, and it pretty much is only a collaboration
Yeah.
tool, I guess. Yeah, you got chat. Chat is part of collaboration, obviously channels and sharing and file sharing, but it's all kind of within the scope of collaboration. It's not trying to be a call center or a PBX
No.
or something like that. Well, yet anyway, you never know; they might change the change the direction. Um, no, that's really interesting, and I think our listeners, a lot of our listeners will be in the cloud and SaaS space, and they will have true products. A lot of our listeners will also be in the solution space as well, and it's really good that actually you've said what you did, which was that it's okay to have a project-led approach. If you're just delivering project after project and they're all custom, they're all kind of individualized for customers, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't make sense to productize and to be completely product-led.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that's the system integrator market, right? Like, there's entire businesses that are built on that. You're basically, you probably are building a product, but you're being contracted to build a certain thing for a certain customer, and what they do with it after that, whether they choose to productize it or not, that's up to them. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're just being used as boots on the ground to deliver exactly what you've been paid to deliver. And again, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
If that's what your business is built on, then great. It's very difficult to use uh, agile approaches in that scenario, though, because the commercials are very tricky and very
Yeah.
hard to iterate on things. It can be done, but I would say, if when I'm talking to organizations about the use of agility and the use of product led, it's much more about you, and as an organization, building your product that you are going to sell. That system integrator space is, yes, it's a lot more tricky.
It's a different looking space. Yeah,
Yeah, because you're basically a
absolutely.
third party, and that get you're already got dependency, right? You want to be eliminating dependencies, and you're literally built on one. So
Makes sense. Yeah, no, that's great. And just back to this kind of agile principles and this agile culture. I've seen a lot of organizations trying to make all of their departments agile in their own processes. So let's make finance agile. Let's make HR agile. Let's all of these different things. What's your view on that?
again, it's the misunderstanding, the misconception, right? That it's about changing your processes. It's just the opposite, right? It's
Yeah.
process makes you less agile. The idea is you should be eliminating process. You want to increase collaboration.
Mm,
So it's not about, oh, we've got this team and we want to make them agile, or this team we want to make them agile. It's like, oh, actually, should those two teams even be separate teams? Should we take people
yeah.
from there and people from there and turn them into a product team, for instance? So that's why I come back to, you need to understand how your organization is structured in terms
Yeah.
of your organization's output. And if you want to be product led, what are my products? What are my value streams? What is the actual breakdown? Then build around that, reorganize
Yeah.
yourself around that. Then all of
Yeah.
that goes away naturally.
Yeah, it's one of the big ironies I used to find was this idea that they're all going off to implement their agile, and the entire this team in the old departmental structure locks themselves in a room for 2 days and on their own and does it. It's quite
Yeah.
bizarre.
The
On the other hand,
antithesis, really.
it really is. Yeah, I agree. And then you can see some organizations, I think, that maybe have done it in perhaps the right way, which is to have people like business partners in those organizations. So you might have an HR business partner or a finance business partner that's related to your particular value stream and what's in the what you're doing in the organization, what you're leading in the organization. And they're there to partner with you to help you remove roadblocks, not necessarily to say this is how you must do HR, this is how you must do finance. They're there to help you maybe pick your way through some of the old processes, but also help remove the roadblocks. Is that something you've seen in
Yeah,
some?
yeah, definitely. It's very, I think, very much a transitional thing, um, but it can be a very valuable transitional thing. Again, it comes back to that collaboration, right? If you can get people working together and you can get people bought into the thing that they're trying to build, then they're going to work at enabling that. So finance business partners are a great example, because when they actually sit within the product, they get a sense of ownership of that product, and now they want that product to succeed. So they'll go away and do the things that need to be done to help it. They're part of the team.
Yes.
Again, as soon as you create those divisions, like, well, now your numbers on a spreadsheet, and I'm not really interested in who you are as people or what you're doing, just that you're over budget and you need to
Yeah.
chop 5 heads or whatever it is, right? And then you've got low morale and toxicity and lack of
Yeah.
psychological safety and all those bad things that we don't want. So
Yeah.
yeah, it can definitely be, again, looking at legacy organizations who are trying to work their way onto a better way. It's impossible to just do a big bang. We can't just go, we're going to transform our whole organization. Everything is going to change. Like, it's not pragmatic. It's not realistic. So you've got to find ways to do things, piecemeal, but you need, again, that mindset needs to be there from the get-go. That culture needs to be there from the get-go, so that you know where you want to get to, and you don't
Yeah.
think that this small step I've made is the end game. Always
Yes.
finance business partners, everything's done now, great, but that's how we're going to do. That's like, no, that's a step. We've learned a thing, we're doing better. How do we make that even better? How do we make that
Yes.
even better? Continuous improvement.
Yeah. Maybe that's one of the red flags when the CEO asks you if you finished implementing Agile. It's
Yeah,
probably.
or the 5-year transformation plan.
Oh my goodness.
I am firmly of the opinion that if you turn up and say, we're going to do a transformation, you've literally failed right there. The second you've said that word, you failed. Because as soon as you put a label on it, and this is, again, partly why I don't like the idea of Agile as a label, it's easier just not mention it ever. Just go in and naturally try and create something new and bring people along with you, and just let it evolve. And why leadership is so important in that process, because they can create that culture and people will follow them. And it just creates, as soon as you say, we're going to do transformation, everyone's like, I'm going to lose my job. Oh God. Look, who's transforming? What's transforming? What have I got to do? And everyone focuses on what they've got to do or how they've got to protect their job. And
Yeah.
you don't want to make
They all
it a
start.
tangible thing.
Yes, absolutely. And they all start petitioning the new transformation director who's just started. Yeah. It's
Who's just going
bizarre.
to try and do this, whatever they did at their last organization.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, you sort of think about these things and you just wonder, what's going through people's minds, imagining that this is going to work, that they can invite this person in who's going to transform their organization in that fixed amount of time and deliver these outcomes without knowing what they're walking into and
No.
what needs to change, what's the culture's like, and who's there. Yeah, so it's quite an important thing. But I think one of the main things people should probably take away from this, and you've said it many times actually, is this idea that it is a culture shift, and maybe to even forget about the product and the development bit, and almost like to sort of say, well, look, can we address the culture first, in general, and then say, now we've got like a bit of a better culture, we've got people working better together. Maybe now we could start to develop our products, in this kind of way. Would that be a fair way to start?
It would be a perfect way to start. I don't know that it's ever realistic. That's
Yeah.
the annoying thing, right? If I could wave a magic wand, the first thing I would do coming into an organization, apart from making sure that organization is viable as a business, right? Like, what they're trying to do is actually going to make money. I was talking to an MD friend of mine we were talking about, the culture is the most important thing. And he went, personally, I think the most important thing is, should the business exist in the first place? I was like, fair point. I made an assumption there. Okay, let's start with that. So making sure the business should exist is viable in the first place. The next thing should be wave a magic wand, culture. Because like I say, everything, culture and mindset, everything else hangs off it. The problem is that's no problem if you're building a business from a ground up.
Yeah.
And you've got an invested leader. A really good example of this, just for anyone watching, is Valve. The company that makes the digital distribution platform for PC games, Steam.
Yeah.
If you haven't ever read it, go and read the Valve Handbook. It's eye-opening the way that organization works. Like, there's no hierarchy, completely flat. Nobody tells anyone what to do. You work on whatever you want to work on. That's the way they work. Just whatever you want to do, you go away and do it, because we believe that you will do the right thing for the business and the company. You cannot build that culture
Yeah.
on a business that already exists, right?
Yeah.
Therein lies the problem. You can't just wave a magic wand and say, hey, this organization that exists, culture's now changed. So you have to tit for tat it, have to be like, right, leaders definitely need to understand, get a vision for the culture they want to create, and start doing that in some way, shape, or form. Just lead by example. But also you need to start tangibly changing processes and ways of doing things to get people thinking and get that social proof in. But, oh, we did this thing, actually that worked quite well. Then you start changing the minds, and the mindset changes. But you need to keep it moving. You can't be like, we changed this thing, everything seems fine, great, that's the end game, and we're done now. You need to keep the cycle moving until then you've got this kind of gel of the culture gets better, which improves the processes, which improves the culture, which improves the processes, and we have that continuous improvement. I think that's the only practical way of achieving it in an existing organization anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's very much chicken and egg, and some organizations don't want either. It's a bit to exist. It's interesting. I've tried before. I won't say where, but I tried in an organization to implement a little bit of this when I was leading sort of products and propositions, was to try and give a certain amount of time every week, or a certain percentage of time of someone's time, to spend doing something that wasn't on the old way of doing things, that wasn't on the old roadmap, and trying to say, let's allocate, like, let's say 20% of your time to really being creative and thinking differently, and saying, what could we do differently, and what do we need from the organization to achieve it. And what I found every time, unfortunately, was that the individuals went off and did it. Sorry, and that was perfect. They went off and they came up with the ideas, and they implemented them as far as they could. Then it got to the point where you needed a bit more funding. You needed to take it that step further. You needed to get the other departments bought in. And then you started hitting their silos, and you started hitting the parts of the organization that weren't bought into that process and would just never buy into that process. So really, I felt like in the end, what I did was a little bit of a disservice, because what I was trying to do could never actually be achieved. But perhaps if you can get better buy-in, would that maybe be a good way for an organization to try and start, is to almost like say, let's siphon off part of our team's time to try and work in this different way, and almost like have it's almost like sounding like the Severance TV series, in a way. Here's the innie brain, here's the outie brain. But this idea that you could possibly have a team running sort of almost like with two different mindsets.
It's very common, right? The grassroots agility, right? Where the teams at the bottom are going like, well, we're going to change the way we work. We're going to do Scrum or whatever, right? The problem that tends to come there is it tends to be a practical implementation. Like, we're going to do Scrum without any consideration given to trying to understand the mindset behind it. Which is one of the problems with Scrum, but we'll not get into that right now. And so you end up with pockets of process, but they might be more agile than the rest of the organization. But again, no one really fully understands what the idea of agility is. But you might be able to start building that and using the results from that to lead upwards. So I have an example that we've just done. So this was at BT. It's a good example, so don't worry. But there was very much in the early days before we transformed it into a product-led kind of unit, was very much 12-month plan milestones. And we had to do a few iterations of that failing. The example I gave before, we did these milestones, it failed, we did these milestones, it failed, to then say, hey, can we talk about a different approach, please? And that led to a living roadmap. And then that living roadmap being communicated and transparent, and seeing the output of that very rapidly, 2-week sprints we were doing, and the fact that that was clearly leading towards the outcomes that leadership wanted, which was we had a contract date we needed to hit, basically, of a broadcast, and that had to go live. And it wasn't about having everything ready, it was about having enough ready. And as soon as you're outside of milestones and things that are constraining you with, this feature must be completely done and this feature must be completely done. Actually, well, we only need 10% of that one and 20% of that one and 30% of that one will get us over the line. And then you get over the line and everyone goes, oh, that turned out that worked really well. And you get a good social proof from that. And then that led on to what I think was a really good implementation, not my idea in any way, shape or form. We had the concept of innovation days, which was a couple of days about every quarter. And it would just be the teams could form themselves into whatever teams they wanted and build whatever they wanted, as long as it was related to the product or the business in some way, shape or form. So you got a cool idea you wanted to do, you think it would be great for the product, you got 2 days to build a prototype or build the whole thing or whatever you can get done in 2 days. But then the lady whose idea it was thought, well, let's make this a bit competitive. We'll have judges. And she brought judges in from other bits of the organization and from the leadership team, which is a genius move, because seeing those leaders suddenly get really, really excited about this stuff that people are producing in 2 days, there are a number of those things that those people produce that are now part of the product. Because they're like just so good and so sensible and so life-changing for these leaders. When they're looking at it, they're going, oh, this is so great, why are we doing more of this? Well, kind of because you won't let us, but maybe we would have let it.
And they're just so forward. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what better social proof can you have than to have your leadership come in and say that this is amazing. That's all
it worked. It worked really, really well. And every time we did it, it was a different collection of leaders. So everyone kind of got a bit of exposure to it, and cool. They were always really complimentary and really excited in their feedback that they would give to everyone. And they really got engaged. It's not like they turned up for an hour and like, oh God, I've got to judge this thing. They actually genuinely got involved, and it was really nice to see. It worked really well.
Very cool.
Like
Very
my
nice.
idea, though. Wish it was.
Oh, that's to give the credit to someone else. No, that's great. No, that's good. That's good to hear. And it sounds like a good practical approach, maybe that people could take away and think about inside their own organizations, perhaps. So that's great. There's another little subject. Just a quick detour, although it's still related, which is just about AI and really how AI might be helping, hindering, perhaps, in organizations, how they're developing products, but then actually also, the development process itself, but also how a team is organizing themselves around delivering a product and delivering outcomes. Have you had any exposure to that, or have you any thoughts on how AI technology could be beneficial to people thinking about trying to bring agile into organizations, or trying to bring out a more product-led approach?
It's a big topic. You've got a number of strands there. I think you've got one is that obviously people are trying to build AI products, and which is the big one at the moment, right? And I think there has to be a bubble around that to an extent. I don't know how big the bubble is. I get the feeling that given how ubiquitous AI is already, it's a somewhat small bubble. I think it'll burst, but there'll still be a lot of value for AI. And then there'll be a few kind of things that people have built that were maybe just a bit too much or a bit too gratuitous usages of the technology. But I use ChatGPT all the time, so and so does so many people I know that are nowhere near as technical as I am, just for all parts of their jobs, and teachers in schools and all sorts. So I can't see it going away. So there's that side of it. There's the people
Yeah.
building AI products. Then there's the use of AI in your day-to-day processes of what
Yeah.
you're doing. I don't think it has any particular impact on the idea of agility. I don't think it has any particular impact on being product led. I think it is a
Mm.
great enabler for some of the tasks involved in what you're doing. So, for instance, I use it for rewording and writing stories. I use it to draft potential breakdowns of larger features. I use it to draft out acceptance criteria, for instance.
Yeah.
It's that 80-20 rule, right? If I can get AI to do the 80% that the grunt work is done, I can focus my time on the valuable 20% and make sure that it's all good to go, which is the bit.
Yeah.
And then I can do more of that. I can do lots of 20% because my AI is doing all of my 80s. For me, that's where the value is right now,
Yeah.
given that LLMs are the pervading technology that we've got. There's a few different things like the release notes that we did on the product in BT. The product lead took it upon himself to start turning those into a podcast. So an AI generated
Great.
podcast. So he'd feed the release notes in and have them generate a podcast that people can listen to. Pretty cool,
Wow.
right? Kind of interesting in that some people really engaged with it and found it a really interesting way to listen to the release notes. Some people just thought it was kind of a bit of a gimmick, but
Yeah.
there was two strands for that. But there's stuff like that is getting used as well. But I think the
That's
general LLM admin stuff is where the value is right now. Where that goes in the future, yeah. If I knew that, then I'll be rich.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's definitely something we're seeing, in terms of the work that doesn't need a human, that doesn't need that human involvement, can definitely be outsourced to AI. And AI, of course, comes with the cost itself, in terms of the platform, but it also comes with the cost that it still needs a human to do the checking, to do the editing. I mean, being in the marketing business, we are producing some content with AI, but we're having to do a lot of work to make it unique, to give it a human voice, to make it accurate as well, because there's still a lot of inaccuracies in there as well. Um, and there's a lot of pros for it as well, because it allows us to provide some of our services cheaper than we were able to do before. So it's great for our customers, so we can do more stuff for them at the same price, or the same amount of stuff a little bit cheaper. But I guess there are some areas where maybe I can see it having a slightly negative effect, which is around what you were saying with agile culture and trying to get people to work better together. And one of the things I've seen in some organizations is people who maybe they weren't completely bought into the idea of working together and the new culture. And instead of attending a meeting, they send their agile, or sorry, instead of sending a meeting, they send their AI note taker
Oh, really?
to the meeting in their place. And I know that's probably sounds like an extreme case, but I promise you all it's happening.
Yeah, I mean,
And
again, that comes back to the culture and the mindset, right? If you've got people in your organization that have that approach, there's two ways you can look at it. Either they're right and that meeting was complete nonsense and should never have taken place, and actually you need to listen to that person more because they've got the better mindset, or it's the opposite and they're just disinterested in everything you're doing and they don't want to be engaged. So you need to look at which one of those it is, I guess. But yeah, like either way you look at it, it's not healthy. You
yeah,
just need to work out which direction of healthy it actually is.
yeah, why they were not engaging
Yeah,
and trying to
exactly.
understand
The,
understand that better.
the other thing I've heard a lot about recently is, have you heard this one, the vibe coding?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, and I'm interested where that will go.
Hmm.
I can see it getting to a point where AI can generate really, really good code that maybe doesn't need huge amount of checks. I mean, I've done stuff myself where in the earlier models of ChatGPT, it needed a lot of finessing. And in the most recent models, I've been able to copy and paste and I've gone, oh, it's just done exactly what I wanted it to do. That's worked. Wow. Okay. I mean, I wouldn't put it in production, but essentially I have, because they're side projects of mine. But, I can definitely see a world in the future where that gets so good that this whole vibe coding thing, which for anyone who doesn't know is basically humans generating code via AI. So you just have effectively designed as an architect, and all the code is written by AI, and the human is designing the system, letting the AI write it. There's a potential for that to work, I think. I wonder if we ever get to that cliff edge where AI is being trained on AI output, and then it all gets incestuous and tumbles off a cliff. I don't know what happens there. If everything's being generated by AI, then what happens? I'm not enough of an expert, but I'm interested in it.
I think we're getting close to that point with marketing and content, particularly through blog content and things like that. We're starting to see a huge amount of what would previously have been considered plagiarism, happening now. And I think you can also see it going the other way, where the AI language, which has been trained, obviously it's been trained from Reddit, blogs, all of these different sources. You can see it now starting to talk like a lot of the mass producers of content, so it's starting to use a lot of language, the navigating, elevating, and all of these different words, because that is now what they're consuming. So it's almost become they're consuming as humans AI generated content, and they're starting to repeat the AI.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like that's now starting to happen a little bit more, and people having arguments as to whether you should be using the M dash and things like that in copywriting. It's all of these different things, which initially it is a it wasn't anything to do with AI. It's just it's part of English writing, but it's picked up by AI because it's a particular technique used in a lot of posts, and then the AI starts to repeat itself, and it starts to repeat these little things that's maybe overuse in some cases in the past, and they start to become a little bit more prevalent. So yeah, I do imagine that maybe in coding we will stop at one point maybe inventing if too many people rely on it. But then on the other hand, I look at some incredibly laborious things. I had to write a Google Sheets formula the other day, and it had to be very complex because of the data I was trying to pull together and work out. And I just thought, if I tried to write that, I'd probably take like half a day at least on it. It's incredible, the complexity of this statement, this formula that I had to put in. And the AI did it in obviously in a matter of seconds. I didn't quite like the output the first time around. I told it exactly what was wrong with it, and it came back with a slight adaptation to the formula, and it worked great. So yeah, it's definitely pros and cons.
Yeah.
I suppose the advice we give most people is use it sparingly and respect your audience. So if it's something where you want to demonstrate value, you want someone to get something out of what you've written, at least have a human read over it and edit it first.
Yeah. I think that's definitely where I sit on it at the moment as well. Is it should be an enabler to a human. That's what it is as a tool right now. Like, go ahead, use it, absolutely use it, but make sure you are generating something from it, and then you as a human are utilizing the output in some way, shape, or form, modifying it, and then using it, not just putting it straight out there. And I think that's true of code as well. Like, but whether that will, I just don't know whether that will continue to be the case. And you said that you might get to a point where it's we're not inventing, or maybe we invent faster because there's so much less busy, like doing stuff so much faster. It's writing all this code that would have taken us days in seconds. So can we invent faster? I just don't know.
This is true. Yeah. If it frees up human creativity to be creative rather than do the humdrum, boring kind of activities, then yeah, that's definitely an outcome. Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch over the coming years.
Well,
What happens to humanity? Never mind software development. So
I can make sure
yeah,
my daughters know how it works. So that's going to be an important thing for me.
yeah, the schools. I can't imagine being back at school now and having AI at my fingertips
I know.
or
Education's
even having
bad
to
at
be a teacher.
keeping up at the best of times, let alone in this day and age. Like, yeah, it feels like the education system needs change anyway, but it feels like it needs kind of drastic change just to work in today's world in the way that,
Yeah,
if we assume that we want to teach people to use the skills of AI to generate work, then it's like actually the tasks we give them shouldn't be generating the work. It should be thinking about the content and what you want the output to be almost. So it's like a different thought process of the task
yeah,
you
right.
start giving people. I'm not an educator.
That's going to be a good subject probably for another podcast, I
Maybe,
think.
maybe. I'm the chair of governors at my daughter's primary school, so I have
Oh,
a tangential. I know it's a very real interest, but I have a tangential um, vision into what's going on in at least primary education. So
oh wow.
I'll let you
Yeah.
know if stuff starts to come up, I guess.
That would be interesting. Yeah, when we got some examples and things, we'll get you back on and probably spend several hours talking about all of that. I think I would say. Um, so just before we finish up for the day, because it's been really useful, I think there's been some really good actionable advice, some good insights, some corrections. I think on what people think, and indeed also what I think about what agile means, and you've definitely helped me, and I'm sure you'll have helped a lot of our listeners and viewers. And I guess that's also something you do as your business, right? You're a consultant, so I guess you're available if someone wants to reach out to you. Obviously, we'll share your LinkedIn profile, links to get in touch, and things like that. But maybe you could just tell us a little bit about you as an individual and your consulting business, what you do for organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as it sounds from this talk, I do a lot of agile coaching kind of work, transformation. As much as I don't want to call it transformation, you have to label it in some way, shape, or form from a marketing perspective. So, uh, looking at how organizations can transform their culture and their mindset, but also how they can look at being product led and hands-on product leadership, product management, scrum mastery as well, getting in the trenches, doing that kind of stuff, building high performing teams. It's all things that kind of I have in my kit bag and very happy to help people out with.
Brilliant. That's great. No, thank you for that. And I think there will be people listening today who will have those needs in their organizations. They'll probably also associate themselves with some of the problems we've discussed as well, some of the issues, some of the areas of concern inside their organizations, getting the culture right. Maybe they feel that their development has got a little stagnant. Maybe they feel like they've got a stack in their product that just is unable to be moved forward. So I'm sure, yeah, if there's any of those people in our listeners today, that they'll be able to get in touch with you and hopefully take that further. So just wanted to say thank you, Chris, for taking the time. It was a good long session, and we also had our small technical issue in the middle, but I appreciate you sticking with us throughout the whole session today. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me on. It's been good fun. I've enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Cheers. And for everyone listening, please keep listening for the next episode of the Grow2Market podcast, or check our previous episodes on YouTube or your favorite podcasting channel. See you all soon.